Find and learn from people who lived it wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from people who lived it.
Welcome to another episode of Learn from People Who Lived It.
This podcast is so many weeks, so many months in the making. You guys don't even know. We've been booked maybe once, twice, maybe 3 times with Lia Pinelli, and it's been a volleying serve between the two of us who have needed to reschedule. But alas, we are here, and I cannot wait for this conversation. Lia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. So I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah. Listen, it was like I said, it's a long time coming, and I'll explain why in a second. But Dr. David Lycan is up in the top right corner for those of you playing along on the YouTube channel. How are you doing today, man?
Hey, good. Just trying to avoid this heat. Oh my gosh, did it get hot fast out here?
It really, really did. Yeah.
It was like nice, and now all of a sudden it's just like
slap.
Go outside, and within 10 minutes I'm ready for a nap.
All right, listen, we're not here to talk about weather. What we are here to talk about today is self-sabotage. We're also going to talk about the ways that we can check in with ourselves to just do a little bit better job of what I like to refer to as just becoming aware, right? To start to discover what's going on between the pipes. And we're going to do that with you today, Lia. And I'm excited for this conversation because my intention is that people walk away from our pod today and they really have some good tangible tools on ways that they can kind of snap out of it. As Dr. Dave will say later, just stop doing it. And we'll figure out how to get to that point. But we'd love to start with the first 10 years of our guests' lives. I think it gives us a nice little runway and look into how you became you. So who are you, Lia? What was 0 to 10 like for you?
Yeah, 0 to 10, honestly, it was good for me. I came from an Italian-American household, and we ate really well in my house. My mom was actually a home ec major. They had that back then. And so she loved to cook, and my dad loved to eat. And I was a pretty happy kid. I was a pretty happy kid up until I would say about the age of 9. I was still happy, but the age of 9, things actually kind of shifted for me, I think, in a way that really informs who I am today.
You want to ask her? You want me to, Dave?
Go for it.
What happened? What was this pivotal, transformational? What was the tip of the iceberg there?
Yeah, well, what happened at the age of 9 was I was always a chubby kid. And, my mom was, being a home ec major, she was a very health conscious in that there was always 2 vegetables on the table at dinner. She didn't buy white bread. She only bought whole wheat. Like I was the only kid in the cafeteria with brown bread, So She was a very health conscious. There was not a bunch of sugar cereals in our house or anything like that. But I was still a chubby kid. I had a big appetite. And I had an older sister who was not chubby. She was lean and energetic and fit. And then an older brother as well, who also wasn't chubby. I was the chubby kid, the chubby one. And of course I got teased, by my siblings about my weight and things like that. But it didn't I didn't like it, but it was kind of the same as any other teasing. Getting called fatso was kind of the equivalent of like being called a dummy. Like it didn't register as being problematic to me until I will never forget when I was 9. My mom approached me very gingerly. She was very sensitive with this topic, but I learned later that my pediatrician had told my mom that I needed to go on a diet. And so my mom approached me and she said, I think she meant she and I should go on a diet together. And that was pivotal in my life because it was the first time, it was the first moment that I became aware that, I'm different. And that's a problem. Like my body is problematic. And I knew that because my sister didn't have to go on a diet. My dad wasn't on a diet. My brother wasn't on. It was just me and my mom. So that was the first time that I went on a diet, and I dieted for the next 3 decades. And it really, really has informed the work that I do today.
So, Dr. Dave, I'll bring you in. I mean, kids are mean and they're just going to say things that, especially if they're your brother, your sister, they're going to give it to you for real. I want to talk about something that I've been thinking a lot about, and it is that fine line between some good-natured jabs and some good-natured teasing, and when we're really doing harm on folks. And so will you chat a little bit about that, Dr. Dave, from your vantage point?
Yeah, it reminds me growing up, when you're hanging around with your guy friends or whatever, everybody ranks on each other, or at least that's the way it used to be when I was a kid. You'd get made fun of for your ethnicity, you'd get made fun of for physical appearance. If you had a speech impediment or struggled with words, that would become fodder. But the fact that you were picked on meant that you were part of the group, and it was mostly done in a good-natured way. Although sometimes it crosses a line, and I think you can see it in somebody else's reaction to things when it's crossing over and it's becoming inappropriate. I think sometimes guys don't know where to draw the line on that, and sometimes it can lead to conflict. I think when it comes to girls, the way that they do it is different. I think it tends to be more cattier and kind of behind your back sort of thing, rather than just confrontations to your face.
So, the podcast called Learn from People Who Lived It. You've been there, done that, you've lived it. What is the impact on coming to your daughter and saying, "Hey, we're gonna go on a diet"? What advice would you give if, like, say, your daughter was faced with the same predicament? Is there anything you would do differently? Would you have handled that situation? Because you were I mean, your mom did the best she could. She was gentle, she
100%.
was ginger, she wasn't trying to be rude about it. Like,
Mm-mm.
but so what would you do differently, or how would have adjusted that situation?
Absolutely. And this is actually something that comes up a lot in my work, because one of the main concerns of moms, particularly moms of daughters, moms like me who have a history of uh, um, dieting and poor body image, our biggest fear is that we're going to pass this on to our daughters, right? So we're
Mm.
constantly kind of positioning ourselves. And I hear this all the time from moms. They say, "Oh, well, I mean, I want to lose this weight and I'm constantly on a diet, but I never ever say anything self deprecating in front of my daughter, or I don't let my daughter know that I'm on a diet." And what I always say to moms is, she knows. I guarantee you, right? I see Dr. Dave nodding there. I mean, she know our daughter, your daughters are watching you. And so even if you're not saying out loud, like I remember, for example, my mom didn't talk about it either, but I always remember she sitting at the table, at the dinner table. I hope my mom never listens to this because she's going to feel all the guilt. But sitting at the dinner table with her little teeny notebook next to her plate where she's tracking her Weight Watchers points. And so it just very subtly, but to me, the message that sends, and the message that sent, and the message that sends to daughters is, oh, this is what women have to do to be acceptable. We have to track
Mm.
points. We have to pay attention to food. We have to be, as some of my clients will say, we have to be hyper vigilant. And you notice that your dad and your brother aren't doing it, right? And so it's the social messaging, and then it's the modeling. And even if you're not counting points at the table, daughters notice when moms hide behind their children in photos because they don't want to be seen, or they notice when they don't look in mirrors, right? Or they refuse to have their photo taken. Our kids are watching, whether it's your daughter or your son, they're watching.
Interesting. So many subtleties there, right, Dr. Dave?
Mm.
But there's been a big movement in recent years toward more of a body positive outlook, and kind of accepting people as they are. But I think the balance is not so much in your physical weight, but in being healthy. And if you're outside of what had been considered like body norms or whatever, if you're focusing on eating healthy and exercising and being healthy, coming to some level of acceptance of kind of where you are, I think is key. We're also talking about too, growing up in a time when there wasn't that body positive
For sure.
movement.
Yes. Yeah. Everybody was looking at Cindy Crawford and
Mhm.
all, these kind of one type,
Right.
body, one skin color, one body type, all of those pieces were certainly relevant. Mhm.
And also there've been periods of time when eating disorders were rampant, anorexia and bulimia, and people were keeping that quiet they were engaging in eating disordered behaviors and keeping it quiet. So
Yeah.
they were going to try to change their appearance and hopefully not get caught doing it.
Leah, did you ever struggle with either one of those two, anorexia or bulimia? Was that ever part of your story?
Disordered eating definitely was, but
Okay.
not anorexia or bulimia. The disordered eating that I experienced was when I got to college. I went to UC Berkeley, and I felt the pressure, right, of being at a top university, and that pressure combined with dieting. So I was doing Weight Watchers and kickboxing 24 hours, 24 times a week. Like I was constantly trying to manipulate my body into what I thought it should be on top of the pressure of being a new Berkeley student. I started to experience binge eating disorder, which is it's a type of disordered eating where not binge and purge. So that would be more along the bulimia lines. I never purged. I never released the food. However, I would overeat to the point of pain and discomfort. And then the other type of disordered eating that I experienced that I did not recognize until I started doing this work is a disordered eating by the name of orthorexia, which I'm sure Dr. Dave is aware of, but it's like a hyperfixation on health. And that was actually what I experienced in high school. In high school, it was the 90s. It was fat free everything and highly processed foods, tons and tons of sugar. And the sugar industry was actually backing that diet fad because they got to pump sugar into everything. If you take fat out of food, it has no flavor. So you replace it with sugar. So I was eating like no fat at all. And I actually developed like a fear of fat. And everybody would say to me that because I would never eat fat, I would eat steamed white rice for lunch every day, and that was it. And then licorice because it was fat free, and loaves of Safeway French bread because it was fat free. And this is not a healthy diet, obviously, but that was what we were told was healthy. And people would say to me all the time, "Oh, you're so good. How do you do it? You have so much willpower," because I never touched fat. And I just thought, "Oh, well, I'm just, a total badass." But really the truth was is I was actually had a fear of fat and realized later, "Oh, that's orthorexia," right?
The ironic thing is, like looking at this now, because I've thought about this a bit. I remember, in the 90s, the fat-free cookies and all that. Um, you end up eating more and consuming more calories because the food that you're eating is not satisfying what your body needs, right?
Totally.
So
Yeah.
so you need a certain amount of fat, and if you're craving fatty foods, it's because your body is needing some level of fat, and if you're giving it something other than what it needs, it's going to keep that craving alive until you finally satisfy it. So you could end up going through a half a box of fat-free cookies and still feel like you want to eat something. So,
Oh,
it
insatiable,
yeah.
insatiable.
So it's one of those situations where, I think the experts got it wrong, which then you could step back from that and say, okay, looking at it now and looking back and realizing that experts can be wrong, um, do we want to question the experts before doing something that feels wildly difficult and unsatisfying and what are the words? You're putting yourself through contortions trying to stick to a very strict diet, and it's not personally satisfying. It's not making you feel emotionally any better. You feel stuck. You feel trapped, right? Um, at some point, can you step away from it and say, what I'm doing right now is not making me feel good about myself or feel, good in general, right? Is there another way to go about doing it and finding balance in it?
Yeah. Okay. So can I transition us just a little bit? I feel like this is a
Yeah.
perfect opening to, because now basically we've set the stage. We're talking about the fact that we're doing it one way and it's not producing the result that ultimately is the best thing for us. We can all agree on that. And so what maybe we can also agree on is that when we don't feel very good about ourselves, we have a tendency to not treat ourselves and our bodies in a respectable way. Another word for that is self sabotage. And we do this continually to ourselves. And I'm very, very interested, Leah, in talking to you about this idea of self sabotage. I'm clear as like crystal clear why I used to self-sabotage for so many years. A few years ago, I went to and experienced a retreat where I was able to really uncover all of those things and understand why I do the things that I do. How was that discovery for you, Leah? What was the underlying cause behind your self-sabotage?
The thing that got me caught up, in my journey was I didn't so much have trouble with the extra quote unquote weight that I was carrying. I mean, I didn't love being 30 pounds heavier, but I also didn't hate it. I wasn't like self-loathing and, talking all these awful things to myself about my body. But what I really had a problem with were my eating behaviors, how much I thought about food, how much I worried about what I had eaten, what I should eat, what I shouldn't eat. Am I going to get too hungry? Am I going to be too stuck? I spent 75% of my mental real estate thinking about food.
Wow.
And not just thinking about it because I'm like, oh, I love food. It was like worried about food, anxious about food, regretful, guilt, all of those emotions that come with having a troubled relationship with food. And the behaviors that then produces, coupled with the actual biochemistry, which was what Dr. Dave was starting to get into a little bit there, around when you're not eating the right foods for your body's going to have a chemical response to that can cause even more hunger. So for me, I was hungrier than most people, my height and weight and gender. Like I can eat as much as my 6'7" husband. That's not normal, right? That's not right. There was something wrong there. And especially when I would compare to my sister. My sister and I, born in the same house, same parents, but yet we were so different in our eating behaviors. She could just like eat a plate of pasta and be done. And I would be fixated on eating another and another and another. So I knew that my behaviors, there was something off. And I learned how to solve for that. And that is part of what I do now, is helping people to kind of understand that biochemical aspect of why are you hungrier than most people? Or more importantly, why do you have such strong cravings for foods that you really wish you didn't have strong cravings for, right? Like for me, it was many things, but one of them was dark chocolate covered Trader Joe's peanut butter cups. They are delicious, right? And I couldn't resist them. And feeling like food had power over me was very troubling. I didn't want food to have power over me. But the self sabotage would come in because every Monday morning, just like everybody else, I would wake up and I'd be like, this week, it's going to be different. Not going to eat the dark chocolate covered peanut butter cups, and I'm not going to drink the wine, and I'm not going to have the pasta, and I'm going to just eat salads. And, that the whole motivation that you wake up on Monday morning. And then usually by like Monday night, you're face first in a plate of nachos with your girlfriends. That is the troubling behavior because you can't figure out why you can't seem to get a hold of yourself consistently. And what I learned in that process was, first of all, it's a very, very complicated kind of answer. But probably the piece that I would love to share here is that the number one most important thing that I learned was that I had a habit. I had normalized letting myself down. I had normalized and really desensitized myself to I can make a promise to myself and not follow through, and that's okay. That's just what I do. And most women, I find, do that. We will prioritize everybody else. And then when it comes to ourselves, we have no problem saying, I'm going to do this for me. And then we don't do this for me. And so it was for me a process of learning to build trust with myself that actually helped me to navigate out of the self-sabotage. That though coupled with not setting myself up for misery. So I always say your future self, she has to have your back. So when you're making plans, like I want to get healthy this week, don't plan to only eat salad with no dressing. That sounds awful. You're not hooking up your future self. She's going to be pissed at you. Your future self on Wednesday is going to be like, screw you, Leah. I don't want to eat a salad with no dressing. So it's this balance of how do I build trust with myself, coupled with how do I also, my company is called Live the Life You Crave, because how do I also live a really full and meaningful and pleasurable life, but also feel really good in my own skin?
So I love this answer. Dave, I'm going to come to you and give you a chance to kind of piggyback on that, double down, whatever you want to do. But I really like what you said there. You really like your personal integrity wasn't there. You like you said, I'll
100%.
do it for everybody else, but I won't do it for myself.
Yeah.
And I was the exact same way, man. I talk about this when I'm in front of people. It's that we left a sentence out on the way up, and like our moms and dads, where it was like, it's good, be kind to others, do things for other people, like put others first. But we left out this bit that says, but not at the expense of yourself every time. And we need to start including that last sentence on there, because for so many of us, we're pouring out, and then we've got this empty cup. We have nothing left to give. So every single person, including us, gets the worst version of ourselves. That's just how it goes. And so,
Yeah.
Dave, I'll give you a chance now to kind of double down on what she just said.
I had a clarifying question. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what you meant by trust? You talked about trusting yourself. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I just want to make sure I understand what you meant by that.
Essentially what I mean is, a lot of times I think, and I work with women, and so I always kind of think about this in terms of women, but women will often make plans and then not follow through on those plans when it comes to their own health and wellness, mental health, physical health, emotional health, spiritual health. And because we always think, oh, we'll get to it later. I just can't right now. And I have changed making plans to making promises to myself. Yes. Right. So if I'm making a plan that I'm going to move my body every day in some capacity, it's not a plan, it's a promise. And then it's learning to follow through on that promise. And that's what allows me to build trust. So that, because I think what happens is that your brain knows, oh, I'm going to make a plan to move my body every day. But then there's that little whisper that's like, no, you're not. You're not really going to do it. Right. And that's the part that I think is the self-sabotaging piece.
So if I'm understanding you, the trust gets built by actually figuring out how to follow through with things that you intend to do.
Yeah.
What I've noticed, and you can tell me if this has been your experience working with people as well, is if you go into this trying to deprive yourself, it's never going to work. And I've struggled with weight on and off. Right now, I'm probably about at the highest that I've ever been. But I know in the past when I've tried to lose weight, if I said, okay, I'm not going to eat any candy whatsoever, that's not doable, because then you get yourself into a mindset where all you think about is, at least a couple of handfuls of M&Ms or something, something to kind of stave it off a bit. From my experience, giving in a little bit and in a measured way, and then being able to enjoy that for what it is, and feeling good about the fact that you're taking a measured amount of something and not eating out of an open bag. You satisfy the craving, you avoid the guilt because you're doing this voluntarily, and you know that it's measured, so you're not really sabotaging yourself, right? So you have to figure out how to rework it so that you're not depriving the craving, but you're not indulging it to the point where it becomes destructive either.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a couple of thoughts about that. I love what you said. As I mentioned, my company is called the Life You Crave. And that is one of the guiding principles that I use in my work with women, which is, when you really if you have a vision for your life, what is the life that you're craving? Because it's not food. It's not the chocolate peanut butter cups from Trader Joe's. You're craving something more meaningful, deeper, more powerful, whatever it is, whether it's in career or family, relationships, money, time. There's something you are craving that you're not currently getting. There's a deep dissatisfaction in most of us. And food is just it's the proxy, right? It's just the thing we use to keep ourselves distracted from what we're really craving. I also say, though, that whatever changes we make with food, and it has to be doable for the rest of your life. Because if it doesn't feel good and it doesn't feel sustainable, you will not sustain it. So it has to feel like love. Like, it has to feel like I could do this for the rest of my life. That's how it has to feel. So when a lot of times we say, I'm never eating sugar again. Well, that's, for most of us, that's totally unreasonable. Right. And it's not part of the life you crave. Like, I love how you said, Dr. Dave, like it's measured. And one of the things that my clients will often picture are things like, I picture myself going to a birthday party and really enjoying just one piece of cake. Right. And then not letting that be, we call it getting a case of the F-its, where it's like, oh, well, F it, I already ate one piece of cake. I might as well eat, for the rest of the week. I'm just going to go on an eating bender. Right. So it has to feel like love. It has to be something that you feel like you can do for the rest of your life. And it really has to fit into your vision for the life that you crave. And for most of us, that vision does not include restriction and
Right.
abstinence.
And if it doesn't come from a place of self-acceptance and self-love, you will get cases of the efforts, because
Yeah.
there's a self-sabotage component to it there. It's like, well, I wasn't able to avoid having the thin slice of cake, so that just proves that I have no willpower, I'm no good, I'm
Yes.
never going to be able to beat this, so I might as well just go hog wild and
Yep.
have more. um, and you're talking about, imagining or envisioning the life that you crave, right? So that's putting an intention out there, that's putting a positive image out in front of you, kind of like a lighthouse that you're moving toward, right? So
Yeah.
when you have that vision, when you have that image in front of you, I think that also gives you an anchoring point when there are times that you have cravings, and you look at it and say, okay, I feel like eating a bag of chips. Well, is that
Mhm.
consistent with who I want to be and
Yeah.
the direction I'm trying to go? It's not, because it's going to take me off track, and then I'm going to feel bad. But
Yeah.
you have to cultivate a mindset of being deliberate about your choices, and when you have an urge to do something, pause and stop and kind of think it through a little bit. And when you have that image of where you're trying to get to, that makes it easier to stop, because now you have something to look toward and say, okay, this is what I said that I wanted to do. Am I moving in that direction right now with this decision?
So as you kind of walk women through this journey, Leah, you have a four-step brain-based formula that you write about, and it's something that, shows up for you time and time again in your marketing and some of those things. And so, am I asking you to give away the whole thing by walking us through that four-step process? Because I really want people to walk away with it from our podcast and our time together with some actionable items.
Yeah. You know what? And no, you're not asking too much there, Matthew, but when Dr. Dave and I were talking, I do have another tool that I actually think would be even more useful for your audience. It's not one that I always share,
Let's
but
go.
it connects so much to what Dr. Dave and I were talking about that I think it would be
Okay.
particularly useful, because it's probably leaving some people with lingering questions that I might be able to give a tool that might help them navigate that, which is, so Dr. Dave had just said, when we're having a craving, the usefulness, the importance of stopping and really thinking it through. And one of the things that I teach my clients is, instead of thinking it through, to feel it through. And here's what I mean by that is a craving is an urge, right? Ultimately, it's an urge. I have an urge to eat chocolate. I have an urge to go shopping. I have an urge to go gamble. Like it's a release of dopamine, right? And now, Dr. Dave, I'm going to get into your territory very humbly here. I don't know what I'm talking about in terms of, compared to you, but my very kind of basic way that I teach this is dopamine is sometimes called the craving hormone, right? It's that release that makes you go get the thing that
Right.
your body thinks it needs. And so the urge is it's that little release of dopamine that's saying, "Ooh, let's go get that," so that we can get more dopamine, right? It feels good. It feels so good to eat chocolate. It feels so good. And so when you're having that experience of an urge is really, it's a feeling in your body. And so what I encourage my clients to do, and we practice this together, and I can teach it really briefly here, but instead of thinking, just internally ask yourself this question: what are the physical sensations that I'm experiencing right now in my body as I'm feeling this urge? And it'll be different for everybody, right? And I'll just explain kind of what urges feel like to me as an example. But I would ask myself that question. And by the way, if you're like with other people and you feel like you can't focus on this, you're having an urge to, drink when you said you weren't going to, or eat cake when you said you weren't going, just go to the bathroom. It takes 2 minutes, right? And you just go in the bathroom and you close your eyes and you just say, what does this feel like? And for me, urges often feel like a tightness in my chest, right? It feels like a closing almost of my throat. It feels kind of hot. I'll feel maybe a little bit tingly around my hairline. they have physical sensations. Now, our society, we are very much bifurcated, our head from our bodies. And so um, we are not we're not well versed in really connecting with our physical sensations. So this can take some practice. But the idea is that as you describe this to yourself, it feels like a fluttering in my chest. It feels like a tightness in my shoulders. As you're describing it, what's happening is you're actually taking yourself out of your head and into your body. And as you go through this, you will find, if you remember to rate it, like how strong is this urge before you do this process? And let's say you're at an 8 out of 10, really strong. I want the cake. By the time you're done describing this, going through this process with yourself privately for a minute or two, you'll find that that 8 has dropped down significantly for most people. That helps you then to actually move through this process. But the more important thing is to remember that it's just a feeling. And a feeling is not going to kill you. A feeling isn't going to hurt you. It's just a feeling. And what I like to remember is that I can handle any emotion. I'm not going to break. So I can feel this urge and I will not die. And then when I remember that, I'm like, okay, so I'm not going to eat the cake. Like, okay, I can feel it. I just felt it. I went through it. It's dissipating and I can move on now. And you're moving on you've gone from this heightened state of feeling like that anxiety of I've got to eat the thing down to like, I got this. I can do this. It's not comfortable, but the point, any real growth requires discomfort, right? I mean, if you think about going to college or having a baby, it's all uncomfortable, right? The growth is uncomfortable and it's supposed to be, and it means that you're doing it right.
Amazing. I just love, you and I have talked about that so many different times, Dr. Dave, about the importance of actually going through the emotion, going through the feeling, going through the thought and because that's the thing that most people try to avoid. They're like, I got the thought, I'm trying to avoid it. And what she's saying is, make no mistake about it. You got to go right through that sucker. And if that means you go to the bathroom for a minute to get through it, then you do it. But bravo. I love that. Dave, what do you want to add to it?
Lee, you just reminded me of something else too that I kind of forgot about out of the context of this. 90+% of what we do is on autopilot every day.
Sure.
So we make decisions automatically. We have an impulse to do something. You're getting dressed in the morning. What am I going to wear? Just grab this. That looks fine. You do it kind of instinctively and intuitively, and you don't really give much thought to it, right? And emotional reactions fall into that same pattern. Cravings fall into that same pattern, right? So to broaden the context of the issue that you discussed, right? You have that urge to go have the cake. Well, maybe 10 minutes prior to that, if you were at a family gathering or something like that, you said something to somebody and they gave you a dismissive response and you felt a little hurt by that, right? But you're not processing it necessarily as feeling hurt. You're just feeling like all of a sudden now, like, I want a piece of cake. I want to do something to boost myself up because I got dissed right now, or I got, I got hurt slightly, right? And we're not talking major trauma stuff, but a lot of times these patterns are ingrained and they work behind the scenes. And so your idea of like, okay, just stop, don't necessarily do anything with it, just kind of process for a second. I think that's a good way to recapture that and to take things from the realm of autopilot into, well, wait a second, I have a choice here. I don't have to just automatically do what the impulse is. I can steer this a bit. It might be hard to steer it, but you can steer it. And that's also something that has to come through practice. You're not going to do it automatically. You're going to do it wrong a lot of times. You're going to miss it. And be very gracious with yourself and just say, okay, I missed it that time. That's fine. We'll just try to catch it next time. Because at least
I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah. At least if you're aware that you missed it, you recognize the pattern. That's a win, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe next time you'll recognize the pattern a little sooner. Maybe next time you can intervene a little sooner, right? And so that's how you build that skill up. I mean, it's just like learning anything. You don't develop any healthy habits or even anything. You're learning how to juggle. You're going to drop a lot of balls if you're learning how to juggle, right? It takes a long time to build those skills.
And I think if you get really good at it,
Totally.
you can just start to figure out which environments put you in a space where you start to feel that way. Are there certain people
Yeah.
that
Right.
make you feel that way? Like you can really go deep on this thing
Yeah.
and unravel it because as I said, like, maybe 30 minutes ago in our conversation, the reason we self-sabotage is we don't have this other stuff under control. But when you go through thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and you start to understand where they're coming from, and then like what you said, I can handle this emotion, I can handle this
Mhm.
thought, I can handle this feeling right now. That
Yeah.
to me is a serious win.
The whole foundation for this has to be self-acceptance, right?
Okay.
So um, if you can't accept where you are right now, even with your flaws and failings, if you try to hold yourself out to be perfect, you're going to slip into self-punishing thoughts and self-sabotaging thoughts more easily, right? So if you look at this as a journey of I'm trying to do something positive for myself, I'm trying to get to a better place, right? When you slip up, it's a learning opportunity to figure out how to go back in and do it a little different next time. So it has to start from a place of acceptance.
Yes, and I would say that 99% of my clients, when they come to me, they are self-proclaimed perfectionists, all or nothing
Yeah.
thinkers, black and
Yeah.
white thinkers, and that takes some undoing,
Right.
because if you're thinking about this in terms of winning or losing, you will never cross that finish line.
Right.
And I would love to also just add here too that the fun kind of cherry on top that I can add to this is after you've gone through this process of feeling it through, and this kind of links back to what Dr. Dave had been talking about a while ago in this conversation. We had been talking about this idea of who do you want to be? What is the life you crave? What you can do is, and we talked a little bit, Matthew, before about I have a toolkit. It's a free toolkit. And it helps you to really identify what is it that you would really love to have your life look like. And when you actually map that out for yourself, what you can do is once you're done feeling it through, you can just take a minute to then link it to the life that you crave, your vision for yourself, what you most want for yourself. And then what that does is it's like that touch point, that anchor that Dr. Dave talked about, right? Where it's like, okay, I just felt this through. It felt kind of crappy, but now I can like access this vision of myself and I can walk out of this bathroom as that woman or as that man, right? Or as that person. I can walk out of this bathroom with a totally different
Mm-hmm.
perspective.
It's kind of like you embody the vision that you want to become before you become it. You start living it now until it becomes reality for you.
I think Dr. Dave and I could talk forever, Matthew, so I'm just going to stop.
No, it's fantastic. The advice that it's been such a joy for me to just kind of step back in this podcast today, because what the two of them are working through, the sequence that you guys are working through. I mean, you're both bright, intelligent, smart people. I don't need to tell you that you're right, but to other people that are out there on the fringe, and everybody's waiting for the magic pill and waiting for the magic fix, and like I'm sorry, it just doesn't work that way. Like sooner or later, you got to own all your shit. You got to face up to all your fears. You got to walk through the scary place. And this is what they're talking about. I mean, the roadmap that both of you have just laid out for somebody should unstuck just about anybody that's stuck. And
Right.
what's so cool about the things that you guys are saying is these are principles that go beyond food. This is
Totally.
the roadmap to getting your life to feel like you want it to feel again, living the life you crave. I love how you put that, right, Leah? Like that's how you get there. So freaking fantastic, amazing. I'll connect you two after this podcast, and you all can connect and become fast friends. But I do want to speak on just briefly this idea of fasting. I saw you guys kind of going back and forth about it in the private chat, and I thought, you know what, this is a great way to kind of wrap up this podcast with I don't want to call it a fad because it's been around for like millions and millions of years, not always on purpose or intentionally, but there is something to this fasting bit that's out there right now. And so what are your thoughts on it, Leah? And then I want to ask you, Dave, like, what do you think too about what she says? So go ahead, Leah.
Yeah. So I think, fasting, time restricted eating is another way of talking about it.
Okay.
There's some really interesting data around the benefit of, allowing your digestive system to rest. There's this thing called autophagy, which is like cellular renewal. There's all kinds of fun, juicy benefits to fasting, intermittent fasting specifically. And it is a method that I do teach clients, but again, it's only if it feels good. So
Right.
I remember actually when I was in graduate school and I had read the book, Why French Women Don't Get Fat.
Oh
And
yeah.
she talks about a grape fast where you eat grapes and that's it. And I tried to do, and anytime I had tried to fast, I felt like I was going to murder somebody. Like I felt awful,
Yeah.
awful, awful, awful. And of course, now I know why eating grapes and then eating nothing else is actually, grapes totally spike your insulin, which is going to feel awful when you come crashing down. I mean, so now I understand why I felt so awful anytime I tried to fast in the past. But the one huge recommendation I always make to people is don't try fasting if you are currently eating sugar or any kind of really refined foods on a regular basis, because your body is not ready to move into a fasted state and you feel good. I mean, you could do it, but it won't feel good.
Right.
Fasting actually feels good when you're doing it right. And it's one of those things that you do have to listen to your body. You know, I do intermittent fast because my body loves it. But there are some days that my body's like, nope, not today. We're gonna go eat breakfast. You know, this doesn't feel good. The guiding principle is always, does it feel good? And if the answer is no, then you should not be doing it.
Yep. I can share my personal experience with that. So from a scientific point of view, your body has about 12 hours of glycogen, which is storage sugar in the liver, right? So you have circulating sugars in the blood. Your individual cells have some glucose available, but glycogen is the liver store of glucose. And once you use up glycogen, then you have to go into keto and start burning fat in order to create the sugars that you need. So the most of the body can run on a variety of different sugars. The brain can only run on glucose. So if glucose levels go low, your brain starts to malfunction a bit. So when you're doing, if you're doing like a 14-hour fast, right? What is that? 16. So if you're doing
It's
8 hours on and the rest of the time off,
yeah, 16/8.
16/8, yeah. By the time you get past 12, you've already used up your sugar and you're burning fat. And it also mildly shocks the body to trigger apoptosis and cleansing of useless cells in the body and kind of
Yeah.
clearing out some of the debris. So if you can do that, there's a lot of health benefits that can come from it. The other thing is from a practice point of view, right? So if you're trying to deal with cravings, if you can postpone eating for an extra few hours, right? It's not the world. Like the goal is in sight, but you're just not doing it right now. And you're doing it in the service of a greater purpose, right? Like I'm trying to stick with this plan of not breaking my fast, right? It's not a oppressive thing necessarily. And if you can be mildly uncomfortable for a few hours, you're also learning how to say no to cravings other times that are not helpful for you,
Yeah.
right? So you're kind of developing that skill and working that muscle a bit. So in addition to whatever health benefits biochemically you're getting from it, behaviorally, you're conditioning yourself to kind of defer the urges until another time. So there's a lot of things that go along with this that I think are useful. And what else can I say about that? So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I just will add that it's a great time saver as well, because I know when I was actually still working in high schools when I first
Mhm.
experimented with intermittent fasting, and it saved me so much time to not have to pack my breakfast or even lunch sometimes, right? Like I could just, whereas normally I was like lugging my, because teachers start early, breakfast and lunch and these big bags and big containers, and all of a sudden I could just leave the house because I knew that I could wait to eat until I got home, and it was
Right.
like, oh, I don't even have to think about it. It was great.
The part that surprised me too, because I used to, be grazing all day long and stuff like that. the part that surprised me is once you do it for a day or two, you just like forget to eat. Like you don't even miss it after a while, which I could have not, I never could have imagined that being the case before I
Same.
started. You just don't miss it.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think about it from time to time, and if I'm honest, I think I'm a little like you, Leah, where I could do it in the morning. I could flirt with it in the morning. There's days where I have to get some blood work drawn, and I don't get it until 8, and I think, well, this is no big deal. A few more hours later, and would be 16 hours or something like that, of fasting. And so I agree. I'm going to put this disclaimer on the bottom just for Dave's sake. But,
Thank you.
everything we talk about here is for education and entertainment purposes only. And you should always be consulting your physician or your doctor if you're going to make big changes like this.
Not me. I'm not your doctor.
You're not the doctor. You are a doctor. Actually, he didn't even graduate high school. He just puts that in front of his name, and it's just for fun. It's just I'm just kidding.
One other point too is, you can do intermittent fasting and take the weekend off.
Right.
You don't have to be so restrictive about it that, if you have a family event coming up, or if you're going away for the weekend and you want to have an early breakfast or whatever, okay, fine. And then just make an intention of getting back on, like no guilt about it whatsoever. It's like, it's okay to take a day off. It's perfectly fine.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You've said it before, give yourself grace. It really is such a critical step in this process, because you're going to trip up, man. Like
and then you take the guilt
mistakes
out of it. And when you take the guilt out of it, then you take the self-punishing out of it and all the dysfunctional behaviors. Just one step has a cascade that will take you to much, much better places and a much better headspace.
Okay, I totally lied. Do you have time for one last question, Leah?
Oh yeah.
You do? Okay. All right. I know I'm kind of holding everybody a little bit longer than I said, but here's the final question, and then we'll wrap up with this thought. And Dave, give me your thoughts on it too. You're somebody who's trying to make a positive change in your life and really improve your relationship with food. But you live in a house where that will not be appreciated by the other members of society. And so there is this thing where you're trying to run one way, but your family is resisting and they want to go in a different direction. Do you happen to have any best practices, Leah, that you've come to over the years for homes that are like this? And I like this question because when I was doing my podcast with Chris Powell and we would talk about losing weight, we would always talk about this dietary element of the person in the house wants to lose weight, but nobody else does. Everybody else is really comfortable
the crab
with
bucket effect.
Is that what it is?
So one crab is trying to get out of the bucket and the rest of them are pulling them back down.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So do you have some best practices, Leah, for maybe some women or even men that are listening today that might be struggling with that point? They want to do it, but they just don't feel like they're going to get the support in the house that they're going to need to be successful.
Yes, absolutely. So there's a couple of things there. One is I definitely get it. My husband is a native to Buffalo, New York. And so if you know anything about how Buffalonians eat, it is literally, it's not a stereotype. It is pizza and wings like 4 nights a week. And there's not a vegetable in sight. My husband actually, he does the cooking in our house. And I'm not joking. It took me years to like break him into understanding that pickles and kimchi are not the vegetable. Like I would come out of my office and dinner would be like the only vegetable on the table. Where's the vegetables? He's like, we got pickles and kimchi. I'm like, that's not vegetable, right? So I totally get it. But here is actually how I've approached it and how I advise most of my clients to approach it, which is it really doesn't matter what everybody else is choosing to eat. So for example, when my family's doing pizza and wings, which is a very regular thing, I will walk into the kitchen and I quickly throw together a salad and put that salad on the table for everybody. And whether they choose to eat it or not is totally up to them. But if you ever look at my table, there will be things on my table that my family loves that I don't love, and things that I love that my family doesn't love, but it's all on the table and it's there for everybody. And the trick to that though, especially for, people who work and who don't do their own cooking like me in their house, the trick is that you want to have really quick and easy veggies and proteins that you can just, because a lot of times, like, my husband's like, dinner's on the table, and I'm like, oh shoot, it's pickles and kimchi night. Like, I have to pull a salad together really quick. So my fridge, literally, if you looked in my fridge right now, I have like 4 different, like, of those pre-made bagged salads that take no time to throw on the table. And I have some turkey meat and cheese that I could add to it if I needed to. But that's the idea. The other little piece, though, I just want to add to that is sometimes I have people tell me that their partners will intentionally sabotage, meaning, I have one client particularly who's like, I've told my husband to stop bringing home. He knows I love these cupcakes. He knows I love these cookies from this local deli or this local bakery. And he keeps bringing them, and I told him not to. And to be honest with you, we can't control other people. I'm sure Dr. Dave would agree. If I could, I would be a very rich woman right now. I can't control what my husband's going to do, what he's going to bring in the house. So that's really where that inner work has to happen for you, to allow a cupcake to sit on the counter and not eat it. And that's where the urge work comes in. That's where the really stepping into this vision of your future self, of really that identity work of what is a woman who can let her favorite cupcake rot on the counter. What is she thinking about instead? Because she's not there perseverating, thinking over and over and over about the cupcake calling to her. She's thinking about something else. What is she thinking about? And then really starting to practice being that woman. And eventually, if you keep letting those cupcakes rot, your husband will stop bringing them home.
It's good advice. Dave, anything you want to add to it?
I'd probably throw the cupcakes in the freezer for another time.
Yeah, there it is. There it is. So he's no help. He's no help on this question. That's
but
fine.
Seriously though, there can be an interesting dynamic though too, where maybe the spouse in the situation has things that they haven't worked through. So you're ahead on your own self journey. You're ahead of them on your own self journey than from where they are, and as you're doing better, that creates some anxiety in the relationship.
Sure.
Maybe there's an unspoken fear that, hey, if you get too into shape and if you're doing really well and you're really successful, maybe you're not going to need me anymore, and maybe the relationship's going to dissolve. And so sometimes that can be a bit of an unspoken fear, or maybe there's some things that they haven't dealt with yet that, the fact that you're doing well triggers anxiety in them because they know that they need to address some issues and they haven't come to that point yet. So any major change and any major personal change in the context of a relationship can sometimes have ripple effects that bring up things in the other person that they're not ready to address yet.
There's also comes up for a lot of women that I work with, this feeling like, well, I don't want for other people to think that I think that I'm somehow better than them or doing things that are more elevated. So that fear, like, well, if my husband brings it home, I should eat it because I don't want him to feel bad that I'm not eating it. Or, and what I have found more often than I used to worry about that as well. Oh, I want to still be relatable. I don't want to be the girl who says no to the cake. What I found was actually that, and I've been doing this work for many years now, more times than not, when I was feeling self-conscious that people were thinking that I was snobby or something for how I was choosing to fuel my body, I had people come and say to me, you know what, you really inspired me. The way that you passed up that cake really, it showed me that I can too. And I've had that happen to myself and to clients more often than not. So I try to remind myself of that and my clients whenever you're feeling like, oh, I don't want to make other people uncomfortable by my food choices. It's like, well, you might be surprised because it could actually have the opposite effect.
Amazing. I'm telling you, this was so good today. It was well worth the wait. And I'm really happy the three of us connected on this one today. Dr. Dave, thank you as always for your insights on this podcast. I really appreciate you, man.
It's always fun to be here.
Yeah. And Lia Pinelli is there. She's in the bottom and she is right here online. You can go to liapinelli.com and you can watch this video. You can learn more about her podcast, her speaking engagements. You can do some of the, or you can participate rather in some of the toolkits that she was talking about earlier, and just get aware. I really think that's the key for everybody. Just start to become aware of what's happening, and then you'll quickly, I think, feel a tug to move one way or the other. So, and if Lia today really spoke to you, she's a fabulous coach who I think could be helpful on just about anybody's journey. So I would hope that you at a minimum, look her up and see if you vibe with her. Lia, thank you again for being on with us today.
Thank you. I had so much fun. I honestly don't think I've had this much fun on a podcast in a very long time. Thank you.
I'll take it. Dave, come on. High five, buddy. We did it. So good, man. Lia and Dave, have a great afternoon.
We have 3 goals with Learn from People Who Lived It. 1, to help you feel less alone. 2, encourage you to seek out a coach, a therapist, a church, anyone who can help you get through your journey and find some healing. 3, when you're ready, share your story with us.
Find Learn from People Who Lived It wherever you get podcasts. Search it using all one word. Learn from People Who Lived It.